Welcome everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Beth right away and we're going to get started.
Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to the second session of the Exposure Studio. As you know, my name is Beth and I am the Exposure's coordinator. So Exposure Studio is an online programme for Calgary-based photographers realised and hosted by Exposure Photography Festival. The studio programme consists of a series of discussion-based events led by speakers of international recognition in the worldwide photography scene. The programme promotes knowledge sharing and provides our local photographers with an opportunity to enhance their professional development. So please remember this is a recorded event today, so if you wish to not be present within the recording, please hide your cameras now. This event will be structured as a screen shared presentation followed by a question and answer session. If you wish to ask a question, please either type this into the chat feature throughout or raise your hand at the end of the presentation. Once we go to that question and answer session, the questions in the chat will be answered first, then we will take questions by those who are raising their hands in the raise your hand feature, which can be found in the participants icon at the bottom. So I will now introduce you to Donna Schwartz, the Exposure President and Board Chair, to present our land acknowledgement.
I have to be quicker on the unmute. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. And welcome everyone to our first Zoom session. And I'm going to hand it back to Beth right away so we can get started.
So I'd just like to also thank the Rosa Foundation and Calgary Arts Development for supporting the Exposure Studio with their brand new online programming grant. So today's speaker is Rania Matar. Rania was born and raised in Lebanon, but now is based in Boston, Massachusetts in America, where she joins us from today. Her work explores issues of personal and collective identity through photographs of female adolescence and womanhood. Rania's work is widely published and exhibited in museums worldwide and is held by many collections and in museums and in galleries and also private collectors. She is also, she has received many awards and grants such as the Guggenheim Fellowship in 2018. I'm now going to hand you over to Rania, who will talk a little bit more about her work and practice as a photographer.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining in, and Beth and Donna, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm learning that I'm your first presenter, so I hope I set the bar somewhere relatively high. I'm going to show a lot of my projects because it feels like all my work is interrelated and one project slowly leads to the other. So I feel like, and as students, we always think about how do we come up with a project, and so I figured I'd talk about it in that, and then we could answer questions about how do you get the work seen and how do you edit and all of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me and then share my screen. I'm born and raised in Lebanon, originally from Palestinian parents. I came to the United States in 1984 and I studied architecture. I did a lot of art in college with architecture, and actually my thesis was designing a museum for the late work of Picasso, but I didn't get into photography till later. But I always mention my background because I think it's my architectural and arts kind of background probably helped my photography. I started making pictures and becoming more interested seriously in photography when I was pregnant with my 4th child. So I always start my presentations with pictures of my kids because I owe it to them. And I'm not going to go into photo family albums, please don't worry. But this work made me fall in love with the craft of photography and really started paving the way for everything I've done since. And I found that I never went back to architecture. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and slideshow. Okay, so in 2000, when I was pregnant with my fourth kid, I started taking a lot of photo workshops. We used to have this actually wonderful photographer who would come over and for like we hired her to come and do like a holiday picture for our children, and it was always an absolute mess and chaos. And I'm like, you know, I should be able to do this. So I started taking photo workshops and quickly found out that I ended up doing pictures that were very different from what I thought I'd be making. I fell in love with actually observing the moments that I kind of took for granted in my own house that I was not looking at. And the fact that I was standing behind the camera made me realize how beautiful the moments were. And at the same time, I was taking black and white and working in the dark room. So the craft of making beautiful prints was very important to me at that point as well. So, you know, by then I had my fourth kid. I was stuck at home with 4 children under the age of 5 and under. So it was a zoo, and it felt like photographing them became something that we did together, and that helped me keep my sanity. And this is what I was really working on for a while. And then, you know, we had assignments like what you guys might do every week. And all my assignments was kind of photographing my kids, developing the film, printing the work. And I really loved that. Then after September 11, you know, up to that point, I was, you know, I became an American citizen. We bought a house. I'm raising my kids, and I'm living like any American person here. And after September 11, the whole rhetoric from the Middle East with the them versus us, let me go back to that. Yeah, them versus us, and all the negativity coming from the Middle East made me really start questioning my whole sense of identity. Like, I am them and I am us, and what does that make me? So I decided to go and start photographing in Lebanon. I so happened to go, I mean, when I was there, I had a cousin who went to a Palestinian refugee camp, and I went with her. And I was shocked because I had no idea people lived in those conditions so close to where I grew up. I grew up during the Civil War. So my circle was tiny, and I didn't get to go I didn't know what was going on, like really not too far from where I lived. And so I was shocked that people lived in those conditions so close to where I grew up, which was relatively cosmopolitan, Western, very Westernized Beirut. So I started photographing there, and I didn't quite know what I was doing. I very much felt like an outsider. And I came to the US, and I made some of those prints, which is not that picture. And I remember showing my work to somebody, and they were looking at the pictures of my children and then the picture that I made in the camps. And that was one of the best feedbacks anybody ever gave me. And this man said, you need to get that same intimacy with everybody you photograph as with the pictures of your children. And which is why I like to start with the picture of my children as well. So that was something I really worked hard on. And since then, this never left me throughout my work. So I work with a wide angle lens. I'm very close to people. And that took a lot of getting out of my own way to do that. So and I found like all through photography, because I photograph people, the hardest thing is always access. So how do I get this kind of access so I could get the intimate pictures? So I met a few non-governmental organizations who connected me with some families. And I started going back over the years to Lebanon. And then by then I made my own contacts. I would go back and give them pictures. And for me, it was a way of telling a different story of the Middle East. And I was focused on, you know, on humanity and dignity, despite the conditions people were living in. And again, without realizing, I was very drawn to photographing women and mothers. And again, one time I was showing my work, and I was telling this person that I'm showing my work from the Middle East, and he asked me, where are the men in your pictures? And I'm like, oh my God, where are the men in my pictures? And then I came to terms with, like, I'm not hired to do this work. I'm making very personal work, and I have an incredible access to the women, and I need to own up to that. I'm telling their story. They are the one holding their homes together, and they were inspiring. And And for me, especially with this picture, I realized that even if I live in the US now and they're living in a refugee camp, there was something so universal about that, like the nursing mother, that the bond we have was beyond, like, was of motherhood and womanhood. And that was a turning point for me to realize that. So again, that's another thing I owned up to through my work. Like, I am interested in photographing women, so I am going to do that. So that was my early work. And I became interested as well in the whole idea of the veil, the hijab. When I grew up in Lebanon, nobody wore the veil. Lebanon has many religions. Nobody's required to wear the veil. But again, after September 11, with this whole divisiveness and the them versus us, and you're with us or against us, they became this kind of division where everybody went to other extremes. And I found that a lot of women started wearing the veil, but it had so many layers to it that I found fascinating. Like, I'm going to go back to this picture. She spent about an hour putting her veil, and she was braiding it and changing colors. And her mother did not want her to be veiled. Her mother did not wear the veil till she was much older. So I realized she was exactly like my daughter, who was the same age at that point, who would be spending her morning straightening her hair in front of the mirror. So I realized there was something about the veil that also became an element of femininity and an accessory to beauty on some weird level. So I started as well including that. So this, I'm going to show some of those. These eventually became part of 4 projects that became part of my first book. So it was like one project that kind of led to another, but for me, they were part of the same kind of overall idea. This was in Beirut as well. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, you guys are doing photography. Sometimes you don't realize, you see something, you make the picture, but it's actually when you're editing that you realize why one picture is better than another. And like, I hadn't noticed, I mean, I wanted to show, you know, you have so much of that duality in Lebanon. I wanted to show the sense of what's happening with the very kind of westernized young woman and her. And then I realized as I was editing that the shape of the opening of her face matched the low-rise jeans. So there's an element that a lot happens in the editing process. And I read at an exhibition I saw at the MFA recently of Graziella Iturbide's work, where she had a quote that there are 2 decisive moments. One is when I make the picture, and one that happens when I'm editing the work. And that really resonated with me, because we think it's only the moment you take the picture, but it's so important, but because what do you choose to include in your body of work? So I'm going to go through those images. And then in 2006, I got stuck in the war between Hezbollah and Israel. And I was there with my 4 children and without my husband. And it was actually, it was traumatizing. So we escaped via Damascus, and I did not take a picture, any photo of the war, because at that point I'm a mother, I need to get out of there. And when we escaped, this is what I saw at the border. And this is the only time I jumped out of the car and made a photograph. And my father-in-law who was with us was like, get in the car, you're at the Syrian border. But that was very important to me, because up to that moment, I just thought it was about me getting my kids out of there. And then I realized, you know, every single person had a story. So I realized I needed to go back to Lebanon and photograph the aftermath, which is so once the war ended, when my kids were back safely in the country, I went back to Lebanon and photographed the aftermath of war. This picture became the cover of my first book that I titled Ordinary Lives. For me, this picture summarizes so much about Lebanon, because it's not, yes, there's all the destruction, but it's also about, you know, dignity, humanity, resilience. And like the mother's looking at her daughter who's wearing a Barbie shirt, who looks almost like a phoenix rising out of the rubbles, you know. And what's happening, I'm just going to spend time on this picture, then I'll move on. This is like a wrecking ball, the crane with the wrecking ball. And the ball was like hammering on those buildings all day long for days at a time, because the buildings were out of concrete. They were so damaged that they were not salvageable. So people had escaped during the war. And they would come back and spend the whole day waiting from 8 o'clock to 5 in the afternoon. In case the buildings fall, so they could go look for their stuff in the rubble. So anyway, this became, for me, the cover. This says so much to me, that picture, about the schizophrenic aspect of Lebanon in some aspect. And this became the cover of the book. So these are pictures I made then, and I'm just gonna little footnote because you guys are photography students. You know, this is a girl who's juggling, and there was something so weird about that whole moment. I mean, this is in southern Lebanon. There were a lot of foreign volunteers who organized camps for those teenagers, and the walls are blown up by rockets, and then here she is, she's juggling, and he's jumping rope over there. There was something bizarre. And for about a year, I printed a picture where I saw the balls in the air because this is what I remembered of the moment. And then for some reason, I went back to my contact sheets, and I fell in love with that picture that I had completely missed the first time around. So I use that as a teachable moment for my students as well. Like, always go back and look at the work when you're not just too attached to the moment, when there's some space between you and the moment you took the picture, because then you're looking at it with fresh eyes. And I call the picture juggling. I want people to know she's juggling, but I like the fact that you might not know she's juggling as well, right? So you could read more into the photograph. So I don't have many more of this project. Oh, and that's another photo that I went to photograph an event, and then it started raining, and the event got canceled, and I thought I was going to leave, and somebody came and gave them newspapers, and it was such a funny moment, and I decided to start photographing. And again, the pictures I ended up choosing, which I didn't realize that I was looking at my edit when I came home, was, the only person covering her face is the person covering her face is the only person not covered with no head covering. So there was something funny that was going on here. And then I decided to start photographing as well the very kind of deep Christian life of Lebanon. I mean, nobody knows it exists there. So these are nuns, and I really love those pictures together. And I had a show where we mixed in the nuns with the veiled women, because there's this whole sense of the head covering where people tend to think about Muslim women as oppressed if they're covered, but you look at the nuns and they're covered, and sometimes, like, this is a nun, why is it okay there and not okay? So there was something about the ambiguity of it that was interesting to me. And then this is the last picture I'm going to show from that series, because this was kind of moving into the new series, and I thought I was making this photo for my project that I'm going to talk about later, about a girl in her room, but I felt like it belonged to this work. And there was something interesting happening here. The boy didn't want to be in the picture, so he went and stood behind me. And I don't think he realized that he made my picture. At some point I felt like I need to tell him you're in the photo. So I made some without him, but I couldn't help but use that one because I think there was something about that became so interesting. So eventually this work became part of my book I titled Ordinary Lives, that included the 4 body of works about the forgotten people and people in the refugee camps, the veil, statement, devotion, modesty, or I have like all the order, or fashion, because I think it's all of the above. And then it included the Christian life and included the aftermath of war. And I felt like I was done. I live in the US and I wanted to photograph closer to home. My kids were getting older, and I started a project very different that I titled The Girl in Her Room. And again, I'm going to talk about how do you come up with a project, because I feel like this is that's the hardest thing, I think, for us as photographers, especially if you take a class and it's like, okay, you need to come up with an idea. And I'm like, so I didn't know what I was going to do. And I knew that I wanted to photograph closer to home. I became fascinated with my older daughter, who had been a tomboy, then that's not her, but, and who was 15, and she was changing to a point where I felt like I hardly knew her. And then when her friends came over, I started photographing them, and they were all performing for each other. So I decided I want to photograph each young woman by herself. And once I did a couple and they picked the bedroom, I'm like, oh my God, that's my project. I felt like they became, and this is very much like, environmental portraiture. So it's the space is as important as the young woman, as her relationship to the space. And it's a way, it's the whole, this is where she's forming her identity and expressing herself with what she's surrounding herself on the walls. And And I thought, and I'm still shooting the same way, but the work is starting to move in a different direction that's more collaborative, because I'm still shooting without a tripod. I'm moving around. I'm still using wide angle lens. I'm not using any lighting, but I'm with one-on-one on one person. So it's not as much as a documentary work anymore where I'm trying to disappear, but there's something where we're making it together. So after I photographed a few girls, I realized that something interesting, like I was exactly like those girls at that point 25 years earlier in a different country, a different culture, but there was something so so powerfully universal about being a girl that age. So I decided to start including girls in Lebanon as well. I mean, maybe what I surrounded myself in my wall was different, but I was going through the same changes, and my room was also my little sanctuary. And there was always, as you would see in those photos, the sense of duality versus like what's on the walls. And then like she has the little farm animals and then the teddy bear. And I have a quote from each girl, and here she said, like, all I was thinking of when I was getting my picture taken was how do I look and compared to the pictures on my wall? Am I beautiful enough? So there was something pretty powerful about that. I still don't know why there's like this car, but that's anyway, so this is in Lebanon. So I started going back and photographing, you know, young women in the Middle East as well. And some of them, and this became the cover of my book, Of a Girl in Her Room, because I love the fact that you have no idea. And it throws people off about the whole sense of what we think the Middle East should look like and the preconception we have of what women look like in the Middle East. But no, here she is. This picture was exhibited as part of a show that was titled She Who Tells the Story, Women Photographers from Iran and the Arab World. And people would come to the curator and it's like, how come you're including this woman? I mean, we thought you're only showing Arab women. So I am only showing Arab women. So I love it that it's kind of confused people. So I'm gonna go through some of those. So this became a little, again, more collaborative as a project. And here, this is in Lebanon. Her room was very bare. And she said, she had new sunglasses. She's like, can I wear my sunglasses? I'm like, okay, then but let's at least go next to the window. So it became kind of but then the pose is all hers. So I'm gonna go through the photos, and then if you have questions, we could look back at those. But so I spend a long time with each young woman. I would say about an hour and a half to 2 hours. My students always ask, like, how do you, like, I'm not talking as I'm photographing. Every once in a while I put the camera down and we have a conversation, and as soon as the camera goes down, I would see that, you know, if she was nervous, all of a sudden she would just go like that and play with her hair. And then I'm like, oh, can you hold it? And then we start over. So it's like pressing the reset button. So eventually we build that together, and I'm hoping I get something that feels very intimate and personal. So again, it was very much based on my daughters, and really all the work that I've been making ever is kind of inspired by my own daughters as they're growing up. And here, like, she gave me a gift. I thought I was done with the shoot, and I want that. And that, as I was packing my bags, and she said, do you mind if you do a couple more photos with clothes that I made myself? I'm like, of course. So she kind of wore that, and this became the picture I used at the end. I mean, I was pretty happy with the shoot besides without having this one. And you see, there's always this organic relationship with the space and the young women, like, with the tattoos that almost match the curtains and the color palette. And it was something that happens because they modeled their room according to themselves, really. This is in a Palestinian refugee camp. And, you know, everything, the lighting, everything about this picture is not great, but I love the photo because she dressed exactly like Hannah Montana. You know, the girls in the camps do not have their own bedroom. They share a bedroom. So they have, like, often, like, she has, like, this is the inside door of her closet that she personalized. And she had the pictures of Hannah Montana, as you see, but she literally dressed like her and posed like her, which I thought was pretty incredible. And her quote was like, something along the line that my idols are Hannah Montana and Selena Gomez. I hope to be famous like them one day. So there was something kind of powerful about that. And this is in Lebanon as well. And here the room was very bare, and she was so interesting. And finally, I'm like, you know, but I couldn't put it together. And she said, I expressed myself in my sketchbook. So I'm like, can we use your sketchbook? So once she got the sketchbook, it's like, oh, do you want me to wear the same shirt I wear when I make self-portraits? I'm like, yeah, go for it. So I'm just telling you that to see how you could build a shoot by making people comfortable. So you could direct them minimally, but have it be about them, because they're also having their voice heard in the way they're expressing themselves, if that makes sense. This is the last, okay, this one is, I had been shooting her everywhere, and I lost my shoes, and I lost my phone, and I lost the cover of my camera, and I would walk on things and they make noise. She said, don't worry about it. I mean, there's like cortex here. I mean, there's everything in that room. So finally, I'm like, you know what, Emma, your room is on the floor. So she went down there and I went up. This was the end of the shoot, but that for me expressed the moment quite a bit. And I'm going to end with those two for this project, because it started moving me to the next project, where I started becoming interested with the details of the body language. Like, I love what's happening here. And here I love what's happening in the feet, even though I sadly cropped the little toe and I'm never going to get over it. But I love what's happening with that. And at the same time, so that's very different. My younger daughter, that's not her, was 12, and she was a late bloomer, and her body started changing with her whole attitude was changing with it. And I was mesmerized by that. Like, there was this awkwardness, but being a woman a little bit. And one time she was laying down on the sofa in Lebanon. My father-in-law came and he's like, look at her, l'enfant femme. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the name of my project. So I started photographing girls in that age bracket. And I 100% let the girls pose. I do not direct them at all. And this became interesting because now I shot the girl in her room digitally, even though I started it with medium format film, but I felt like I was working in all sorts of different condition and lighting, and I needed to shoot more to get the girls fully comfortable, so I switched to digital. Here I went back to medium format, and it became an important part of the process because it slowed the shoot quite a bit. And these girls are growing up in an iPhone and a cell phone this generation. They have no idea, when I'm telling them I'm shooting film, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So they keep wanting to look at the picture of the back of the camera. I'm like, you can't see anything. So all I would ask them is to look at the camera. So the gaze became very important, but then I let them do whatever they wanted with their hands and their feet. And it was pretty incredible what they came up with. I went to photograph her sisters, not her originally, and she was sitting there pouting in the background. And again, I'm a mother, so I told the mom, you know what, I'll take pictures of her, but I was literally doing it as a favor to the girl and to her mother. And she just came and the camera loved her. And I didn't end up using her sister's picture, and another picture of her became the cover of my book. And I love the little one nail. I love the what do you call it, the bun onto one side of the head. And I love in this work, again, I mean, they're starting to be aware of their femininity, but they're still at that very awkward age. So, and you see the way they pose, there's something that I call a beautiful awkwardness. And often the limbs become very long and they don't know what to do with them. And again, I went back to the refugee camps as well. And here I'm going to show this and the one after, because that's again, I started photographing in both my cultures, and that was important to me. So this is a 12-year-old girl in Brookline, Massachusetts, where I live. Her bracelet says love and Israel. And this girl is a Palestinian refugee in a refugee camp in Lebanon, again, 12-year-old. And I didn't discover that till I had my first show of this work, which is why we're going to talk about editing. When I started laying the pictures on the floor, and I realized, like, oh my God, they're almost identical to girls. One is Palestinian, one is basically Israeli, and they have the same pose, same age. They're going to have very different life, but they're both going through those same physical, biological, emotional changes at the same time, which I thought was very powerful to me. Again, I don't know if anybody saw Mad Men, but that was kind of the hair. So I just have a couple. Then I started, and I love them actually, because that was pretty, the attitude is pretty incredible. And then I started following. So the picture on the left is the photo that I photographed for L'Enfant Femme. And then I started following some of those girls over the years and photographing them a couple of years later. And now some of them, now I have the third, and a couple I have the fourth, but I'm just for now I'm putting the two. So that's the same girl again 3 years later. So one is pre-puberty, one is after puberty. And it's interesting because some of them, you know, they were very awkward before, and like the first one, and kind of came into themselves like after that. But some, there was an innocence about being younger, and then even though she dressed up for it, but there's something about her body language is very protective with the way she crossed her legs. And here the parents bought the picture, and it was, I went there to re-photograph her. It was such a gift to see the photo there. So it was perfect. And that's the same girl, and you're gonna see her many times. She was in my first project I met her. Her name is Samira. I've been photographing her really since she was 5 years old. And I mean, she's been part of all my work really over the years. Okay, are you guys tired? I still have a lot. You're okay? Okay. So when my older daughter left for college, I have twins, my boy and a girl. When they both left for college, it was hard. I mean, as a mother, and because for one, I'm realizing that not only it's like my relationship to her is about to change, but as she's getting older, as she's growing up, I'm getting older, and it's something that was pretty powerful coming to terms with that. And this photograph became the signature of this work. So this is not a book yet, but if it becomes a book, I think this would be the cover of the book. Because this is one photo, not two. There's a corner, and the girl is standing inside the corner, on the inside corner. But I love that they almost look identical, but separated by like 30 years. Like as if this is what the mother used to look like, and this is what the daughter is going to look like. And then the body language of the daughter, who she says the world is ahead of her, and the mother is kind of with that protective stance. So this became an important photo for me. And this became a pretty complex project. I realized I was good working one-on-one with each girl or young woman. And here, there's something much more complex that's happening visually, but also in the moment. I mean, there's like a triangle happening while I'm observing two people. I'm observing the relationship to each other, but also the relationship to me. And I tend to play a lot with mirrors, and I love what was happening here. I mean, what's happening in the mirror is very different than what's happening in real life. And this is a picture of the older mother who, since after we took the picture, she passed. So in a way, the empty seat kind of was symbolic of that. So I'm gonna just keep going through those. But for me, this is very much to also show you that all the work is so autobiographical on some level, like it's related, really, and I didn't mean it to be this way, and it kind of just happens. And I didn't even realize that till I had an exhibition called In Her Image, where they showed all those 4 projects, the girl in her room, L'Enfant Femme, Becoming, and the Unspoken Conversation. And the way the curator laid it out, it was almost like going through from pre-puberty to middle age. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing this. So this is Samira again with her mom. And here the mother was a painter, and she made those paintings of her daughter. They're from two religions, where the mother's Muslim, the father's Christian, but also like, so she wanted to symbolize that, but also wanted to symbolize the teenage years where the daughter wanting to be all about her, but wanting to also be left alone and to disappear. So there was something about that. So we did set it up. Once I found out these were her paintings, I wanted them in the picture. And here, I mean, this is the kind of thing that this was a gift, that when somebody does that for you to, you know. And this is like the 3 generations, which is kind of where I find myself in. So this is, what's interesting is both the daughter and the grandmother, the name is Lida. So they have the same name. It's like the mother is in that sandwich age in between. And this is the last picture I'm going to show from that series. And this is now the next generation, but it's an important picture. She is the mother, the older woman, is a very famous Lebanese artist. Her name is Huguette Calan. She died since we made that picture, but I love her and love her work. And she was, as you see, she looked like she was absent, but she's still wearing her smog and like, when she had the paint mark on it. So and there was so much emotion between them. So I started crying as I was photographing them. And then once I started crying, they both started crying. So out of respect, I put my camera down, and the mother, who looked like she was not even present, literally tells me, "You're an artist, emotions are important, don't stop." So every time I tell the story, I get the chills, because the picture bothers the daughter, but she knows that her mother asked for it to be made. And I love the photo, because for me, it was such a powerful moment for her to tell me that at that time. I'm going to go quickly through those, because that was a parenthesis, but I felt like it was important, and at some level it influenced my next project. And you know, all my work has been about womanhood, and then this kind of is a project that I didn't plan on doing, but it was important to do. In 2014, when I was in Lebanon, I started seeing all the Syrian refugees all over the streets. That was before we heard all about the refugees in the world, basically, and all the refugee catastrophe. But they were already in Lebanon. And then I found quickly that they were standing, because people would kick them away from the storefronts and the nice areas. I found they were often standing in front of these very ornate, textured walls that you know, when you know somewhere, you don't notice it anymore, that I stopped noticing. And I didn't realize that till I started seeing the kids in front of them. And, you know, these walls have so many layers, and it was as if the kids became a new layer on that wall, because they were, in a way, anonymous, and they're kind of just on the wall. But at the same time, for me, I wanted to put them in the center and make it about them, to give them their individuality, because when we hear about refugees, we hear about the million of refugees, which becomes almost meaningless because we don't know what it means. But when you look at one person, it becomes more personal. And I ended up including some of those girls in the L'Enfant Femme book, because I wanted them to include them as girls before being refugees, if it makes sense. So anyway, I'm just showing those because I started noticing these walls and how the relationship, you know, and I had done all this work as a girl in her room about the relationship to the girl to her space. And now these kids are living on the street, and the relationship is to the background they're living in front of. And they were selling flowers or Kleenex or something. And then, you know, I'm interested in a lot of my work, as you saw, with the girls growing up, the mother and daughter, with the passing of time. And here I ended up running into some of the same kids 2 years later, which was heart-wrenching. Actually, I'll say it was bittersweet, because I was happy to know the kids were okay, but at the same time, you know, they're still on the street instead of being at school. And this, the same boy that I ended up seeing again a few years later. So I'm gonna move pretty quickly to my last 2 projects. Are we okay with time? Okay. Well, I want to talk about this. This is what I'm actually was just working on for the last 2-3 years till life shut down on us now. And this is what I got the Guggenheim for. And this is a project that it started almost accidentally. I was doing a residency in an artist residency in rural Ohio at Kenyon College, and I fell in love with the rural landscape. I mean, this is very different from what I knew. At the same time, about 3.5 years ago, I literally lost half my hair. And as you see, it's very much part of who I am. But I became obsessed with hair in the sense of what it means, our texture. Like I was almost feeling violated that I had no control as of why my hair was falling. So I became really obsessed with our sense of physicality and texture, especially with these, these are girls who left home, again, the ages of my daughters, and they're no longer in the cocoon of home, but they're out in the real world, whether they're in college or whatever. So I started photographing them outside in that landscape they're finding themselves in, and focusing on that, on their relationship and that texture of them and of the landscape. And of course, I decided at some point to take the work to Lebanon. And because I had done this work with the refugees, I was becoming obsessed with these textured walls. So in a way, you have the landscape in the United States, at least, which is how it started, and then how it developed into including some of that. So it became different from my other work, I want to say. And again, it kept transforming as I kept working on it. And it became very much about, it started being very much about the texture and the hair, as you see. And then eventually it became even more, I want to say collaborative, in the sense that, as well, some of the pictures got included in an exhibition titled Live Dangerously in Washington, D.C. And I loved that they saw the Live Dangerously in some of those photos. So it kind of helped move my project slightly in another way, where it became also about the girls taking risks and climbing on things or whatever. So again, it's that same sense of texture and collaboration and all that, but there was something as well about being strong. I wanted to be about empowerment. I'm rambling a little bit. And this is in Cairo. So again, I was very fortunate to get a Guggenheim for this work. So I got to travel a lot to do this work. And at the same time, my youngest son started college, so I had the time to do it. So most of my other work was mainly Boston or Massachusetts and Beirut. And then here I went to Cairo. This is in Cairo. This is in Lebanon. But I was able to travel a lot within the country as well. And I mean, every picture has a story. I don't think we have time to get into every single story, but it became something that I wanted to be very much about. There was a performance aspect. I wanted it to be empowering for the girls. And I would just say something about her, because she's a Black albino, and her picture it's one of the pictures they included in that Live Dangerously show in Washington, D.C. So I texted her to tell her and to thank her to be part of the project. She's from Wichita, Kansas. I was in Miami with my daughter. We intersected there when I made that picture. And she went to D.C. to see the picture eventually. And the museum bought it, and she wrote a whole thing about it, thanking me for seeing the beauty in her. That, so there was something that for me was very rewarding, that that she felt like for her it was important to do that, if it makes sense. And again, like here, we were climbing on rocks, and I had been photographing her, and then she see me staring at the water. She's like, "Do you want me to get in the water?" And I'm like, "Well, I wasn't going to ask you." There were tons of mosquitoes. We're getting bit everywhere. And I find it, as a mother, I would tell you no, but as a photographer, I would love you to. So she actually got in the water, and this was pretty incredible. I mean, all our legs were bleeding the next day, and I cannot believe she got into that. So she looks so beautiful and peaceful, like an Ophelia, and at the same time, this was not exactly what was there. And here, this is not cotton, this is snow, and it was freezing cold. So we would take a few pictures, and she would put her coat on, and then we'd run back outside, and we did that. So I'm going to go through them, and we could answer questions if you have more questions about that after. So like this is in Utah. So I mean, this was in North Carolina. So really, this has been a gift for me to be able to travel a little more to do this work. And she's somebody who actually found me on Instagram and said that asked me if I could photograph her, and I looked at her, and actually she's all covered in black, and so there was I thought there was an oxymoron almost, but and then her Instagram page said, "Follow me, I'm toxic." So I thought she was cool, and I've collaborated with her a few times since, and then she always brings her friends, and she's completely. She loves being part of the art process, so she brings her creativity to it. And she's somebody in the Boston area who I have the same relationship with. So at some point I connected them, and before the COVID started, I wanted to start this kind of collaboration with the two of them. And I love it that, you know, she's Jewish from Brookline, she's a Shia Muslim in Lebanon, but now they became friends, and I wanted to like photograph her, then do another picture when I go to Lebanon in response to her, and then come back and do that. So I still hope to do it when life opens up again, hopefully. So I'm gonna go through, okay, I'm just gonna talk about this one, sorry. This was one of the photos I made in Kenyon College, and I was photographing her outside, and then she asked me if I could do some pictures in her room for her. I said, okay, I thought I was done. I started taking pictures with my iPhone, and then she took out her dress, and the lighting on her, I mean, she looks like a painting. And I'm like, oh my God, this is, so I brought my camera and started photographing her. And then I sent her the iPhone pictures on the spot, and she posted them on Instagram and said, body positive, empowering, or whatever. So, and this is what made me realize that I wanted to start moving the work more in that way. And this was really nice for me to hear that. So, sorry, I have a lot, but almost done. And this is in Lebanon. And this is Samira again, who I'd photographed over the years. And all the pictures I made of her was inside the refugee camp. And then one time she asked me if we could go outside the camps to make a picture, which is when we did this one. So that was a very special moment. So I'm showing the last few, even though this is one of my main images, because it kind of started leading me into the project I'm making now with the COVID situation, where, you know, we all got stuck inside. And the first 2 weeks, sorry, I'm just gonna get water. I don't know, it's probably the same for you guys over there. The first 2 weeks were very heavy because nobody knew what we were doing. So I started editing my work for a future book of this. And I was very aware of the fact that we're stuck inside, and the whole sense that all my pictures were having to do with the outside, and now we're inside. And I realized how many I had that had to do with the sense of inside and out. And at the same time, I was in my kitchen. I had 6 young adults in the house, so I was in my kitchen almost all the time if I wasn't working. And I would observe from my window across my yard and across my neighbor's yard. I would see my neighbor in her kitchen on her window. And one time I saw her sitting on a window seat and she was reading, and I thought it was beautiful. And this is how my floor was. And I started seeing all these pictures, that had to do with the windows. And so I found that picture then, and I put a post on Instagram, literally saying that and I bought a digital camera, a medium format digital camera, and I went on a whim on it all. And I said, okay, I'm going to start photographing my neighbors from their window, thinking I'm just going to go walk down the street and take a picture from somebody at their window. Little did I know, I got such an incredible response to this post that it turned into a project. And this is what I'm working on now. And so I realized 2 things. First is people had time. We're all stuck at home, and people had time and were bored. So everybody was willing to, I mean, people were excited to have somebody come over. And you remember at the beginning, it was kind of very oppressive. At the same time, nobody was in a rush. So instead of, and so I ended up driving. There was no traffic whatsoever. I was the only car on the road. And instead of going, thinking what I was going to do, it turned into a photo shoot at every window. So I found myself photographing the exact same way I was always working, but with people across a barrier, which became interesting for me because intimacy is important to me. And how do you get that intimacy when you cannot really touch people or be really close to them? And it was a learning experience for me to do that. And then I found that what became interesting is the fact that I was working with this whole relationship to the outside and the landscape. And I was kind of doing the same thing because all of that landscape was reflected into the glass, which was pretty incredible. So it kind of moved in a direction that became more interesting than what I thought I was going to do with it. And I'm having tons of fun with it. It's slowed down a little bit now because we're in that zone where we don't know if it's open or not, but so I'm trying to use the time to edit the work a little bit. So I'm going to show some of those. And they gradually, so this is like one of the early ones I made, and I feel like this was the mood back then, right? Where it was just like everybody's in their pajamas and waiting. And as time went on, it became more, people would dress up for the shoot, and there was something more happening with it. But again, it was something interesting because I'm looking at them, but they're inside. I mean, that became, this whole sense of being inside and outside became so blurred. And I'm looking at what they're looking at in a way because it's all getting reflected into the window. And these, I don't know if you remember, I had their picture earlier in my other work. I had photographed them many times over the years. They're identical twins, and they're always overlapping like that, which is very cool. And, you know, the other work I was mainly, you know, were more structured in the sense that I'm photographing, you know, girls in that age bracket or, you know, following something more on a linear aspect. And here, it was important for me to include anybody who's willing to be photographed. So I have older men, I have women, I have kids. And it was important because we literally are all in this together, right? I mean, it affects everybody somehow. So we're almost done. I'm sorry, I went a little over, right? So this is more recent, and but it became in a way, as time was passing, recent. I find like it almost became like that little window became a frame or a stage almost, and people could do whatever they want within that little real estate that they had there. And she's a tango dancer. We're almost done. And this is what I'm going to end on. But when we were, I had photographed her. When I was done, she asked me, she's like, do you mind making a picture for me, for her? And she got these two stones and put them there. I'm like, oh my God, that's my picture. So I didn't end up using anything that I photographed before. And then what became very cool about this is, in a way, I'm very grateful because people were giving me their time and their trust, but in some way, people were grateful because somebody's coming to their door. Like they would often have, like I had, you know, she would leave rocks for, like I had little things people would leave at the door for me because they couldn't invite me in, right? So there was something very beautiful about what's happening. So just one thing is, the Boston Globe, this was one of these projects that Instagram has been good for me. I didn't use it as much for anything else. I found people from Instagram, then people found me through Instagram. Then the Boston Globe found this work through Instagram and got a big, I got a lot of square footage in the Boston Globe. And then I got more people to photograph because of that. So the circle kept growing. It became all about, you know, how we're craving connection and connectivity, and this is it. So this I was showing if you want to talk about editing, but I'm going to stop now. Oh. So was that a lot?
Thank you so much. There's so much in there to sort of like think about, and sort of like it's very
So fast that I don't go over.
So I guess I'll have a look at the. I don't think many people have took to the chat box. So what I will do is I'm going to ask you a few questions first, and then we can open it up to see if anybody wants to.
Yeah, people, don't be shy. Please ask me questions. Otherwise, it's just me talking. So it's.
So I found it really interesting at the end there, where you pick up on Instagram and how that sort of like almost like it really informed your projects. You know, with sort of like dictated who you photographed almost in a way. And I just found that really interesting because obviously it's, you know, the social platform is still sort of relatively new. And I just thought, you know, do you think that would be something that you do again, is put that call out? Or I was just really interested in that sort of relationship between Instagram and your project and how it.
You know what? I don't know. I have to say, I have a love-hate relationship to Instagram, and I'm sure many of us could relate to that, right? It's like I don't want to share too much, but it seems like now the only way to get the work seen is kind of mainly Instagram. I don't know how many people still go on websites. But so that specific work, Instagram was very helpful in a way. I feel like now I'm running into a little bit into the problem where people now, if they don't see if I don't post their picture, they think I don't like it. So I'm trying to tell them I'm not posting all my work. I don't want to post all the work. I want to post a little bit, but I don't want to put it all out there. So it became this thing where I almost need to give back and post people's pictures, but at the same time, I'm trying to be careful not to post everything. So I'm still juggling what is the right way to do it. But I have to say, and not only that, Photograph Magazine just wrote a beautiful piece about this work, and it's also from Instagram. I was gonna have a show at the Cornell Museum at Rollins College in the fall of 2021 of my In Her Image exhibition of the work. That show was going to travel, and the curator changed the whole exhibition to make it about the window project. So I feel in a way, and it's been a weird way for me to work because I'm not even done with it. Like she keeps asking me to send her the edit. I'm like, oh my God, I don't, you know, it's kind of a backward way of working. So it's kind of, at the same time, it's a very timely work, so I didn't want to just keep shooting and then scanning and then showing it much later, which is in a way why digital and Instagram was important in that work.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So I don't know how I use it in the future. I'm not sure.
So I'm just going to go to the chat now, and it's gone wild since I mentioned it. So I'll go through the questions there.
Beth, can you see the hands up on screen or no?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? If you make it on the square, you'll see people. Okay. If you click on the square on top, like I just did that actually.
Oh yes. So if we go to the questions in the chat box first, and then
we can get Angela, Ashley, and Emma, who all have hands up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Rocio was wondering, how much do you disclose to your subjects about your project? When you talk about performance, do you mean they decide how they pose and address the camera? Like how long does it take you to start and finish a project? There's a few questions in there.
Oh, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Okay. How I disclose to people? I mean, I tell them I want to tell them everything about the project up front so that they could decide if they want to be part of it or not. So I have to be 100% open, show them what I've done so far, tell them, you know, that this work could be published or exhibited or used on social media, and then that, you know, there's no payment between me and them, but I'm happy to give them a print. Or most of them don't even care about the print. They want the digital, you know, they want the JPEG to post it on Instagram. So here we go. But I feel like it's a fun experience, and I try to make it a fun experience for them. And I feel like, in a way, it makes them think out of the box and do something that's an opportunity for them to be part of, I guess. So I try to be as open to them as possible. But then I go to the shoot. I have no idea on earth what to expect when I go there. And for all my work has been the same way. So I don't pre-plan my shoots. I go there and I do the best to make something great out of what's available. So I typically, sometimes most of the time I don't even know the person, let alone know the place, but there's a great level of discovering each other like that. So so I don't over direct people, but like with the window, I'm outside and I'm screaming, right? Unless there's a window that's not too far that's open, but there's so much reflection, and depending on where they're standing, sometimes they disappear completely. So I have to move people, and so I don't over direct, but I kind of move them in a place where I want to see them. I always like to see hands, if you notice. So I'm like, I could tell them I would love to see your hands, but I don't tell them what to do with the hands, if that makes sense. I think the most important thing is I try to get them to feel comfortable so that they could, if they want to do something fun, they could do it. I'm not trying to impose anything or not. I'm not sure if that answers the question. But so I kind of wanted, I direct slightly, I want to say, but I don't want it to be about me at the end. And you find that if you direct people too much, all of a sudden they look so unnatural that it doesn't work. So you have to kind of, and then I'm like, okay, stop. Sometimes because, so you can say, I'd love to see your hand, or look at me, or don't look at me. I might say, I want to please put more hair, but I don't tell them exactly what to do. With the windows, I tended to ask to please not to wear logos. And I discovered that bright colors were working great. So I'm like, just bring a bunch of colors and we could decide or play with it. So that's kind of, and then the longer you spend with somebody, the more you learn about the person's body language and attitude and angles, and about the space and how they move in the space. And at the same time, the more they get comfortable. At the beginning, people are probably more self-conscious, and if you make them feel good and comfortable, it shows in the photo. So I would say, even with the window project, I'm spending about an hour with each person. I mean, there's not much room to go, right? So, and often I have to go to the bathroom by the end, so I have to go home.
Okay, so then the other part to that question as well was, how long does it take you to start and finish a project? So once it's ready for like publication or exhibition, I guess.
You know what? I tend to work, I didn't realize how much reflection I have on my glasses, I'm sorry. I tend to work the window one might be shorter. I don't know where it's going because we don't know where this whole COVID thing is going. But like the other project, I would say I work a couple of years on them. And I don't know when, I feel like at some point I start either repeating myself or getting bored with it, or else I'm not bringing anything new to the project. And I find that often it's gradually starting to move to something else. Like when I love Femme, my daughter was reading, I became interested in the mother-daughter. There was a slight overlap, and then I was kind of a little bit somewhere else, which is interesting because often what happens when you're publishing a book, by the time the book comes out, you're already on the next project. So it's kind of hard because you want the book when you're actually in it, but I don't know if you feel like that, Donna, or you're often like by the time the book is gone and you're just somewhere else with your work. So I would say don't put the limit on yourself. When you feel like you're just starting to make the same picture over and over, maybe you're just getting stale a little bit. So.
Okay. So then our next question is from David, who said, can you talk a little bit about how you manage like releases for the children, both in America and Lebanon? And then how does this work for like street children? Because obviously they're sort of underage, like who signs the form?
This is not the answer you want to hear, and probably not the answer your teachers want me to tell you, but I dumped the releases a long time ago. It felt like in Lebanon especially, as soon as the release came out, there was this trust, something in the relationship that shifted, and people starting to question the whole thing. So I feel like if I told them what I'm doing and they see my work and tell them it could be exhibited, and it's kind of informally in an email or in a text or whatever, I kind of stopped it. And now I have people who want to buy 3 photographs for an institution, and they wanted releases, and I had to track the girls and get them. But they're older, so it's not a problem. So, and I think, I don't know, I felt like the releases were a way altering the relationship a little bit. And maybe now it's easier because they have them on the phone where people could just sign it and you don't have to give them this piece of paper that they're signing. So I might start that eventually, because now that I have to track people to ask for releases with a little bit of a pain. But I found I have sometimes the opposite problem where, you know, I have a show and they're like 20 photos exhibited and people are like, oh, why is my daughter not in the exhibition? So it's kind of, you can't win either way. If you're comfortable, I think it's safer to have releases. So my husband's always arguing with me that I don't have releases. But one time there was a woman who was hounding me to photograph her daughters. I mean, for my project, not a commission even. And I went there, gave her the release, and she started calling her husband. She's like, we need to get a lawyer and whatever. I'm like, okay, wait. I don't want this. Either sign it or don't sign it, but I don't, you know. So I didn't do the shoots, and I realized that it makes them overthink it. Like, I'm not gonna, I mean, but at the same time, it's a long answer, sorry. I'm very careful where the pictures end up. So like, I only would use them as part of my work or my book, or if it's a magazine about my work, or else an exhibition about the art or my work, but I'm not gonna sell them as an advertisement for cigarettes or whatever it is, you know, so that's where you have to be careful.
Okay, thank you. I guess it's really important to take people's contact details. I guess if you're similar to yourself, you don't necessarily like that way of working because it puts people off. It's quite important.
You won't believe it, but the way I found these girls again to get their releases is Instagram.
Yeah. So Instagram's quite
we are. So.
Okay, so the next question is from Twinkle. She said, how do you deal with the emotional toll working in backgrounds like the refugee camp? And how's that balance your sort of like moral sort of like dilemmas? Do you have any moral dilemmas with that?
You know what, the refugee camps at the beginning was actually very hard. And it was hard because I didn't even live in the refugee camp. I would go photograph in the refugee camp, then go spend the day with my kids and go to a nice restaurant and go to the beach or whatever. And I was really struggling with that whole duality. And then I was telling my father, there was a little girl I loved, like, I want to take her with us when I go take the kids to the beach or whatever. He's like, and it was interesting because he said, don't even start that because, you know, just keep them separate. And it was a good advice he gave me. And eventually I realized, I mean, I'm there, I'm paying attention to them. I'm not paying attention to them. I'm giving them a voice and a face, and I'm building a relationship with them. Some of them, like, you know, I had to send money to one of them today because Lebanon is a catastrophe right now. I don't know if anybody follows. It's not very much in the news here. So it was an exercise for me to learn to separate a little bit. And I think it was the healthiest thing to do. And once I was able to separate, I don't know how to explain it, was almost healthier, because before I almost felt, I don't even want to say sorry, but I felt sorry. I felt bad for the conditions they're living in. I felt like I'm trying to save the world and whatever. And once I was able to just look at them as people and have this relationship as a mother to a mother, a human to a human, then it was actually, my work was better, the relationship was better, we're more equal, and to come to terms that my life is different from their lives, but I could still be friends with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's like a sort of like barrier, I guess, in between. Yeah.
But it was a barrier that helps me get rid of the barrier, if it makes sense. I think because I could then, you know, when you feel like it's responsibility, you're almost putting yourself in a position that, okay, I'm better off than they are. So, And that's not healthy either, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, it's a lot, actually, that picture of the woman nursing for me with that moment, like at the end, I'm like, you know, she's raising her kids and I'm raising my kids and our lives are very different, but there's something that we're just mothers and women and doing that. So now, like when I go to Lebanon, my daughters often come with me. There's this family of Samira that I take the girls to visit them and all that, and they stay in touch with her on Snapchat or whatever. So there's something nice about being able to keep that separate. Maybe I took the easy way out, I don't know, but it was my way of dealing with it.
Okay, so our next question is from Danny. He said, I'd like to know how you were able to get more in depth about finding the right channels for your projects, specifically something like your work, like the work you did in the Palestinian refugee camps. Can you describe what the process is like?
Actually, you know, that's how I met Donna. I went to what you call portfolio reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few of them in the US. The main one, the big one, is in Texas, in Houston, Texas, and it's called Photo Fest, the meeting place. And it's when you're ready and you feel like you have a portfolio and prints that you're pretty happy with and a relatively good edit, it's good to start putting it out there. And it's really hard. I mean, people are bombarded with emails, so you can't just keep emailing people. Even Instagram, I mean, or social media, you took pictures and people just go like that. I mean, if you're lucky, they might notice. I got lucky with this project, I guess, but I don't know how many people spend time looking at a photograph in there, right? And so these portfolio reviews did a lot of good to me. I mean, I met great photographers who became friends, such as Donna again, but a few others. And this is so important because, you know, it could be a lonely process otherwise. And to have each other is kind of, you know, you can ask questions about galleries, about somebody could read your statement. And it's nice to have this network. But also I met galleries, I met collectors, I met museums. And the thing to remember when you go to those is you're going to meet a lot of people and you're going to think like, oh my God, I'm going to walk out of here with a bunch of promises or whatever. But it's mainly about building relationships, and things take time. And, you know, like the museum show I got at the Eamon Carter Museum, and eventually it went to Cleveland. He's somebody, the curator, I met him at Photo Fest. And then I had to meet him again 2 years later. I met him again 2 years later. And then one day, out of the blue, I got an email, can I have come for a studio visit? So things take time, but that's the way to start building the relationships. Another thing is there are a few, I mean, there's so many of them, so you don't want to get caught on that, but there's to pick the right call for submissions. One of them that I found was pretty good is called Critical Mass at Photo Lucida. And if Donna would know it probably, but I could send it to you, Beth, as well. But this one is like you submit 10 images, but you have to pay for this one, but you submit 10 images and it goes to a pre-screening set of reviewers. But then if you make the pre-screening, it goes to like 200 reviewers from all over the world. So it's a lot of people are seeing your work. And even if you don't get selected, some people are seeing the work and they're filing it away. So I think there are a few ways like that to do it. I found these are, for me, the portfolio reviews especially were a good one. But you do pay money to go to these things, so you want to be prepared. You want to have a body of work that you're comfortable with, and you have to leave your ego at the door, because, you know, sometimes you're going to go and you're going to have a fantastic review, and then you go meet the next person who's going to say, I don't know what to do with this. So this is, you know.
Yeah, that's really great advice. We actually have a portfolio review at Exposure as well. Just for everybody watching.
I mean, these are very good. To start with, I started with the local one in Massachusetts and Boston, and then started. So you do want to start with the local one, just at least to get a feel for what it's like. You feel like, you know, you have 20 minutes typically, and that's not very long. And you don't want to spend the 20 minutes talking, because then you want to hear what the other person is saying, right? So yeah, it's good to practice locally or practice with your friends or whatever, so that when you kind of know how to present work, and not to make huge pictures, but make them big enough so somebody could see what you're doing, but you want to be able to have people have enough time to be able to flip them at a table, right?
Of course. Okay, so well, our next question is from, sorry if I'm going a bit too quick, it's like a bit of quick fire.
I'm okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not in a rush. You could do, yeah.
Do let me know if you need a drink or anything with my sort of like questions.
Okay, that's how I felt after my talk.
So the next one is from Carrie, and it said, how do you approach your subjects, i.e. the kids on the wall, you know, the ones that you find like within the streets? And obviously the COVID project you found.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. The project of the kids on the street is a little bit different because they were on the street, and actually most people didn't want them around, and I was there, I was nice to them, and I was, you know, so and then there was, so that was, and I was talking to them, so it kind of was, that was easy. But that's the only project where I would go and I would photograph them on the spot. For my other work, I would approach people. I mean, you know, you see people typically, and I don't know, sometimes it's like there's a person, I know I want to photograph this person, and it's something about this person. It's not what you think of in traditional, like, oh my God, she's beautiful or whatever. It's something about the attitude or a tattoo or something. Or if I see a mother and daughter that look almost identical, whatever it is, I literally would go to them and I'm like, you know, I'm doing this project, and can I just have your email, and I will email you about it when I get home. And I would actually, what I would do, because I learned all the little things, and I could tell you that, I would send the blank email on the spot to the person and copy myself. So when I come home, it's in my inbox, because otherwise I forget about it. So, and then when I get there, then I send them my website, I send them a little blurb about the project. This is where I disclose what I'm doing and everything. And I tell them as much as I can tell them. And then I would say most say yes, maybe because I'm picking people who are interesting enough that you would know it, they would say yes. So just along that, one thing I would say not to do, because I used to do it, where I would just give people my card. But, you know, probably as soon as I'm going to turn around, that card ended up in the trash, or it's going to be lost in their handbag or whatever. So don't put it in there. I mean, you're putting a big responsibility on people to reach out to you and tell you, yes, please photograph me. So I stopped doing that. And then the other thing I did, where I would like take their card or take their email and then stuff it in my bag, and then I would come home, I'm like, what the hell is this? Because, you know, it goes in the wallet with a bunch. So my formula that works best for me is I would email it on the spot, copy myself, and then it's in my inbox, and I email them something. And this way I have their contact, and it goes in a folder that I call Photo Boston or Photo Beirut or whatever place it is. And I could always find the person, you know, so.
Oh, that's really good to hear, actually. That's really,
yeah, in a good way. And this is where I would say the work could be shown in exhibitions or whatever. So make sure so I don't have a release, but it's pretty implied in there.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next question. So how do you monetize your work? Who are your clients based on your subject matter?
Well, I do sell my work. And I teach workshops, and I don't do commercial work. So I apply for grants, and I sell pictures through my galleries. So that's something that I'm pretty open. You know, typically actually when you have a project, you have like maybe the same pictures that sell. And the rest are the pictures that are important for the story, that are important in the book, but they're never going to sell. But they're pictures that I love anyway, you know, that are important for it. So, but as long as you have some, I mean, I don't think I would live from it. And I have to say, I don't have the pressure of sending my kids to college. My husband took over that. So for me, I'm trying to just be self-sufficient in my own photography. So I do that. I'm trying to think if I haven't, it's been mainly between grants. Like, you know, we have the Massachusetts Cultural Grant. The Guggenheim was nice. So I might do commissions that have to, like there's a commission I got hired for in Cleveland, but it's for the Gun Foundation, but they pick somebody because they want you to do work for them on exactly the way you do your work. So these are very nice when they come along, actually. But
do you work as an architect still, just out of curiosity,
no.
alongside it? Okay. Just from, like, I guess past experience of going to a lot of artist talks, a lot of
No,
people
but you know, another thing that I did, for example,
support.
oh, sorry to interrupt you, but another thing what I did, like when I was doing the mother, like now, every once in a while I might get somebody who wants to be photographed for the mother-daughter project, but they want it as a commission. So I do take some of those because this is nice. I mean, I do it the work as if I'm doing my own project, but I'm getting paid for it, you know, so these are the kind of commissions I would take. I don't do like weddings or other stuff. And I teach workshops. So somehow it works.
So Beth, I wonder if, so not all of the questions in the chat box have been answered yet or delivered, but I'm gonna go to, I don't know if you can see them or not, Beth, I'm gonna go to people on screen and unmute them and let them ask their own questions. And then if you feel like you have more questions that you want to ask, do the little raise hand icon on the screen and I'll go in there and get you unmuted and you can ask the question yourself and we can give Beth a little bit of a break. Okay, so I'm going to go to Angela first. And Angela, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question? Great.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you for sharing your work. It was wonderful to see it all. My question has partially been asked, so I do have a more specific subset of it. I've finished a project on teenagers and started very much like yourself with photographing my own children and kind of got lost in their world and just expanded it to many teenagers. And on a recent trip to Israel and to the West Bank, I saw a lot of the kids acting in the same way as these kids that I've been photographing in Canada did, but they look very differently. Somebody's in an army uniform or so forth. But one thing that I've always been challenged with, even in Canada, is getting access to teenagers. I know that, you know, going up to approaching somebody on the street as perhaps somebody that doesn't have a home is a bit different than having to get in with the parents and get access to a teenager. So I'd be interested in understanding how in these other countries you've managed to sort of get in and get access to these specific. You
know, I mean, the teenage girl, I mean, you know, I mean, I do it the exact same way. I mean, I approach people and the exact same way I do it. I mean, with the younger girls, I had to go through the parents. With the teenagers, I really didn't go through the parents. If they were 16 and under and they really wanted to be part of this, I needed the parents to approve and I made sure I wanted that, but the girl made it happen because by the time she's 16, she wore her parents off, if, you know, like it did happen. So I did approach people the same way, I want to say. And I mean, depending how long you stay there, but it typically works. But the thing that I found very useful is to ask everyone you photograph at the end, you have friends who would be good for that. And you might connect me to them. And my circles for every single one of these projects really grew from the people I photographed. I mean, if they enjoy the process and they've like, all of a sudden, I mean, by the time you leave, it's like, you know, on the door, it's like, oh, you know, I have a friend who would be great or whatever. It happened all the time. And it's happening with the Windows project where I photographed somebody who contributed me to a whole street. Then one of them connected me with somebody an hour away in Worcester. So it's just the whole power of connection is your best friend with this. Okay. So you really need one to get you in the door.
Yeah, the one. And do you work with a fixer when you go to some of these other places? Or are you
know what? And yes, I had in Cairo, I did, and actually he helped me connect me with a lot of girls, actually, which was fantastic. Yeah. So if you have a fixer, yes. In Lebanon, no. I mean, I have now a driver who could take me around because some of the areas I don't know, but he's not really a fixer. It's more somebody who's with me.
Right.
When I was doing the early black and white work, right after the war, I had somebody who was more of a fixer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right.
But if you have a fixer, they typically like even start with like his cousin or his niece or something, you know, you need the foot in the door.
Okay, so I'm going to come to Emma next. I think Emma had the next question.
Hi, thanks. I'm curious about how your family's relationship to your work influences your work. Maybe like especially in those early days when they were more present as subjects in it. But like, do they feel represented within your work in a way that they enjoy or find to be accurate? Are they exposed or made vulnerable by it? Does your desire to protect or please them come into conflict with your need to investigate and communicate on a broader scale?
You know what's interesting? My kids at some point stopped being part of my work, even though they very much inspire my work. Like I had to, when I was about to publish my Girl in Her Room book, I had to force my two girls to be photographed, to photograph them, because I'm like, there's no way I'm putting this book out and you're not in it. But at some point, they didn't want to be part of, and it makes me sad because I have this series of all these girls photographed every 3 years, and I would love that to have this for, I don't have that for my own daughters. So, but at the same time, they really, since they stopped, I mean, it went to a point where they stopped wanting to be photographed, but they're my best editors and they helped me quite a bit. And like, especially with the Girl in Her Room, they would know all the girls by name. They don't know the girls, but because they kept looking at the pictures. And there was one photo that my daughter loved where that girl had a bunch of Post-it notes all over her room that her mother wrote one for her every day, and that was like her Christmas present. And so the room was covered with all these colors Post-it notes, and my younger daughter made me do that for her. So it was in a way like art influencing life as well, not only life influencing art. Does that make sense? Yeah. I have two boys, and my sons never wanted to be part of it. I mean, especially once they grew up. When my oldest are twins, and my daughter who inspired this work, I kept feeling guilty that has a brother, like that, my God, I should be doing something with boys. And he was like, if you ever ask any of my friends ever to photograph them, I would never speak to you ever again. So I'm like, okay, that solved it. But they're very, like, they come to the shows, they're kind of interested in the work in a strange way. My younger son did advanced placement photography in high school, and my daughter now works at Christie's in New York in the art world. So somehow it was very much part of them growing up. But what's interesting is my photography grew at the same time as my kids were growing. Like it was very much, you know, like as I was getting busier, they needed me less around them. So it kind of worked out nicely. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to Ashley next. Ashley.
Thanks very much. Rania, thank you very much for sharing your work and your approach to photography. I was fascinated about your interplay between collaborative work and directed work. And I wonder if we could apply that to your editing process. You called it the second decisive moment.
Yeah.
And how collaboration might come into that. That's the first thing. And then the second part of that question is, do you have a set way of sequencing your work when you're preparing for a book or for an exhibition? And what is it? Or does it change depending upon the circumstances?
You know, it's actually a very good question. In the editing work, I don't involve the people I photograph anymore. I mean, I send them the couple of pictures, but then I'm the one who's editing. And often the one I pick is not their favorite, but this is something that's I made it very clear from the beginning, right? Because, you know, people tend to look often about, oh my God, is my nose looking good, or am I not looking fat, or whatever it is they're looking for. And I'm trying to be pretty raw in the images, especially with the girls and the mothers and daughters. So I don't involve them in the editing, but I'm hoping that all the work is respectful enough that I'm not in any way not showing anybody that's going to upset the person. Let's put it this way. But I think once you involve people in, I mean, I had a student because it opened the can of worms, because then the people are picking a picture where they're not looking at the art anymore. They're looking at how they're represented in the picture exactly. But I'm looking at a whole body of work, and sometimes there's a beautiful picture of this person, but I have one that's very similar of another person. So you have all of it comes into play. I might ask friends to help me with the edit, or curators or galleries or whatever, but not the people in the photograph anymore. But I do involve them in the sense that if there's an exhibition and they're exhibited, I make sure to tell them, I photograph them next to their picture, so the dialogue is open. If I put it on Instagram, I'm tagging them. So I'm involving them, okay? As for sequencing, every project changes, I wanna say. I tend to put my favorite pictures in the front and in the back somehow, and then put something that flows nicely in between. And maybe it started with the portfolio reviews because I wanted people to get to see the great images before they get tired, but at the same time I want to end with something great that they're going to remember. But then once you start working on a book, a lot of other stuff comes into play, because all of a sudden you're often not looking at a picture alone anymore, but now you're looking at it in relation to what's in front or behind or across on the page. And so it's a little bit different, and that's complicated, I have to say. And so often I would try to sequence a book with the way I had a sequence on my website, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. So you have to kind of print. I tend to print as you see and lay them on my floor, and then play around with it. But also often if you're exhibiting the work or publishing the work, there's another person involved who would help with that. Was there more? Was that the question? Okay.
Okay, so we're nearing to, well, it's actually gone over the time now, but I noticed that there might be one more question from Henry.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. I enjoyed listening about your process. So some of these questions we don't usually get an opportunity to get an answer from. So I apologize in advance here for being a bit blunt, but how big are your prints usually? What does your work usually go for? Another question is, have you been influenced by the work of Sally Mann?
Okay. First, Sally Mann, it was like the first book I bought. When I started my photography of my kids, I was working as an architect, really, and I just fell in love with photographing the daily life of my kids. I remember somebody telling me about it when I'm buying the book, and I love that book. And and actually my husband wants to buy me for my birthday, which was back in March, my first photograph, and I want a photograph by Sally Mann, but I didn't know how expensive they were. So, but anyway, so I love the work. I don't know so that probably was for my early black and white work of my kids. As for my pictures, different projects. I'll tell you about the project, the last couple of projects. So basically I print them, in 3 sizes, but mainly 2. And when you start working with galleries, you start editioning it. So like my smaller size, the image is it's 19.2 by 24 with a white border that's becomes of 3 inches, so 25.2 by 30. And it starts at 3,500, but then as the edition sells, it's an edition of 8, and as the edition sells, it becomes more expensive. And then I have the main size, which is an edition of 6, and it's 29 by 36. With the border, it becomes 37 by 44. And these starts at 5,000 in edition of 6. Then I have 2 very big ones. Because I cannot print them myself, I don't have that printer, and not many people want the really big ones, but it's nice when people do. The larger one it's 40 by 50 with the border. Because I like to keep a white border on the frame, and I frame them with a white frame, so the border is part of the paper. And so the border, with the border, the size is 48 by 58 in addition of 2.
So you're moving more really into medium format territory of what you're shooting with then.
I've been shooting everything in medium format except The Girl in Her Room.
Yeah, great.
Even the digital work I'm doing now with the windows is medium format with the same proportions of the camera that I was using.
Are you on phase 1?
In here?
Phase one is a type of camera, or are you using?
No,
like
no, no. I'm using a Fuji. I don't remember the letters. The 50
GX100 or whatever.
No, the medium format one.
Yeah.
I don't know the name. I'm in love with that camera. Sorry, I forgot the name of it.
GS100.
GFX50R.
Oh, 50R, yes. Yeah.
Yes, and I only use a fixed lens. I never use a zoom or anything, and I use a wide angle lens in all my work. So I'm not technically, all I have is a camera and a lens. I don't have a tripod, no lighting, nothing.
Yeah.
So it's actually.
Okay, so we are doing our best to keep up with questions and also to not wear Rania out too much.
Okay, one more. Can we do one more?
We can do one more. Wilmer, we got, I think you have a question. Do you have a question?
I could ask a question, yes, thank you. My question is...
Can you, Wilmer, turn your volume up?
Maybe write it down, but oh.
Yeah, if you can type it into the chat, then I can read it out. Do you want to do that? And then we'll let Wilmer have the last question. Here we go.
Oh.
Do you pay the models?
No, I mean, I'm not hiring models. I'm just photographing regular people. So and I'm trying to make it something that's about the experience and the collaboration, and I give them print if they ask for it, or else I give them digital files of what I use. And so for me, it's more about the process and the empowerment and the collaboration. And they're just, I mean, they're people I'm finding. So I think the money thing changes the whole relationship.
So we're going to start to wrap up, and I'm going to turn this over to Beth in a moment. I'm going to thank Rania sincerely for joining us. Thanks so much. I know Beth is going to do the same. I also want to just ask folks if you have suggestions. This was our first session. And so, you know, we're all getting our legs under us. And if you want to send Beth or me an email, just with any suggestions for our next meeting, that would be great. Because, you know, the idea behind all of this is to make everything work the best possible way for everyone who's participating. So let us know before we move forward. And with that, I'm going to thank Rania, and I'm also going to turn it over to Beth, who has a few closing words.
So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much as well to Rania. That was just an amazing talk, so much information, so much good advice, and a lot to take away from that. So yeah, thank you so much for accepting our invite on behalf of Exposure. I'd also like to say thanks to, again, the Rosa Foundation and Calgary Arts Development. Without them, this programme wouldn't be here. So thank you so much for supporting this project, and all of our participants as well for asking questions, applying to the programme. You know, again, this wouldn't be the same without you. So I guess I was just going to say to everybody, thank you for attending and coming on time. And we'll see you Sunday for session 3, which will be with Mark Seeley talking to us from London.
Well, thank you guys so much, all of you. Really, that was fabulous. I enjoyed it. I hope you didn't get sick of me yakking too long. and very good questions. So it sounds like it's going to be a great semester for you guys, a great whatever program. And Beth and Donna, thanks again so much for inviting me. But thank you. I hope I answered all the questions and I didn't rush anybody or whatever, but thank you so much. And I'm reading all your chats. How can I keep those because they're going to close and leave, right? Or did I just take a screenshot? I'm going to take a screenshot so I can see, read your right comment, your nice comments, you guys.
Yeah, we can save them as a file as well.
Oh my God, there's so much. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see this.
Okay.
I hope I answered all your questions. I mean, if I see something I didn't answer, I'll email Beth. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you on Sunday, right, Beth?
Yes,
Or Mark?
Sunday, 11 a.m.
Yeah, and that's going to be amazing. So, you know, have your brunch early and get ready for Mark Seeley, who is an amazing speaker. Okay.
I'm jealous, you guys. This sounds like you have so many great speakers coming, actually. Wow, these are good questions. I'm reading all of this. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.